I appreciate the fact that the ball is now in our court here in the House. And we want to look carefully at 1986 law and its legalization provision. Some say the bill granted undocumented immigrants amnesty in the law signed by President Reagan. Most undocumented immigrants who qualified for legalization received temporary status. Those temporary residents were allowed to apply for a green card after just 1 year. And agricultural workers were allowed to apply for a green card immediately without any period of temporary status. And so the law in 1986 imposed neither a penalty nor a fine. And so I think an overly critical examination of the 1986 law would be hard-pressed to say that the Senate bill provides amnesty. It doesn't, and that's the difference. That's the one huge difference. Under the Senate bill, undocumented immigrants who register must pay a $1,000 fine and are placed into a provisional status for a full 10 years. Throughout that period, they, of course, must remain employed, satisfy the requirements of good citizenship, make sure they have no tax liabilities, to remain eligible for provisional status. But the one thing it does is it takes them out of the shadows and gives them an opportunity to earn permanent status. Remember, too, that in 1986, they were protecting the borders with flashlights and outdated equipment. We now have a much more effective system, and we ought to. We're spending about $18 billion a year on it, and we've talked to ICE and immigration people repeatedly about whether we're getting our money's worth in that circumstance. Another criticism of the 86 law is that while the legalization program went forward, the promised enforcement never followed. There may be truth to this, and I'm not sure, but even if enforcement didn't increase much in the years immediately following, it certainly picked up now. And this committee, I think, has done a good job in trying to make sure that it's doing a much better point in making certain that we get enforcement. Now, according to the analysis of the Immigration Policy Center, the federal government has spent a total of $186.6 billion on immigration enforcement. Each year, we detain and remove record numbers of people, spend more money on immigration than on all other federal law enforcement efforts combined. And still, the Senate responds to some of the criticism by the Senate bill, responds to some of that criticism by preventing undocumented immigrants from registering for provisional status until the Department of Homeland Security has begun to implement, underline, begun to implement two new strategies. A strategy to gain effective control of the southwest border and a southwest border fencing strategy. And provisional immigrants cannot get a green card unless and until the border strategies are substantially operational or completed. And that the E-Verify, a new technique that we think is going to be pretty effective, is mandatory for all employers, and that the Department of Homeland Security has an electronic exit system at air and sea ports to identify visa overstays. And maybe the most important way that the Senate bill differs from the 1986 law is that it sets out to actually fix our broken immigration system. The bill aims to prevent future illegal immigration by facilitating legal immigration. And in many ways, the biggest failure of the 1986 legislation was that it didn't leave us with an immigration system capable of meeting the future immigration needs of the country. No way to satisfy our agricultural needs and our non-agricultural needs as well. And so, as a result, we need to make sure that we fix the system, and this discussion with our distinguished witnesses is one way to move this forward. I think that we can do it. I think we've got something to build on. I applaud the other body for reporting this work finally at last, but nothing is perfect, and perhaps we may be the ones that help improve it.